Good morning. I am very honored to be with you and appreciate your interest. Cecilia and Juliet simply asked me to say a few things, mainly in not just in my capacity as intellectual or analyst, but mainly because I'm the director of the Institute, and they wanted to make sure that the Institute is on board on this project, and I certainly can assure you that that's exactly the case. Precisely because of this bureaucratic role, I have not been able, as I would have wished, to attend your sessions, although I have very good vibrations and comments from a number of people that still work in the Institute these days, but when we have a meeting, they say, well, but I run again to the meeting because it's fantastic what's going on, and I don't want to miss anything there. So, but anyway, I'm truly unable to say more than one line of bureaucratic welcome. So let me take this time to say a few things in terms of what would be and what is my take on the kind of research that you are doing. I would say that gender relations and information and communication technologies are both issues that are transversal to the entire realm of social organization. Gender relations, we know, permeate every domain of human action, from the very beginning of history, by the way. And information communication technologies are the infrastructure of our society, of the network society, and therefore they are always present in various forms in all domains of social interaction. So what happens when two transversalities transverse each other? Well, I think in this case, their study offers a unique perspective on the processes of social change in our society, because particularly because gender relationships, being the foundational relations in our society, are in a dramatic flux in the last 3 decades or so. We know that patriarchalism is not dead, but we know is shaken, is challenged more in the last 3 or 4 decades than in hundreds of years before. Mainly because women are changing. The problem is that men don't, and they shouldn't in terms of their own specific interests. That's the book with Marina. Why men should change with all the privilege. No elite, no dominant class has ever left history without resisting to the end. So there is a process of change, mainly linked to the transformation of women, and therefore to analyze the transformation of patriarchalism, it's a fundamental window on the overall process of social change and culture in our society. And on the other hand, to understand the dynamics of new information and communication technologies, and particularly of internet networks and the social networking processes. The combination between the two, again, make these two the transversality of these two transversalities a particularly significant perspective on the understanding of social change. Now, you can see that we can go on this vein easily, and by the end of the day, I promise we would have created a new theory that would just blow up the postmoderns. Problem is that we are not fancy intellectuals. We are researchers, boring researchers, and therefore we cannot go further without the painful job of actually producing empirical evidence on what we do and what we say, and that's the critical difference between the work that you are doing, the work that the Institute does, and all this general commentary on the new trends in society. And therefore, rather than continuing developing what could be a theoretical framework, but again based on air, on thin air, let me actually make explicit what I see as the trends in actual research and the trends that I could foresee as potential new avenues of research in your domain. If we take the traditional distinction between two traditions of feminist theory, the serious feminist theory and feminist research. On the one hand, the issue of equality, on the other hand, the issue of difference. Okay? So in terms of gender equality, I would say that we have a very solid body of research and evidence in which, in fact, Cecilia Castaño and Juliette Webster, in their own respective contexts, had been pioneers in this work, and they have produced themselves and helped to produce a considerable amount of research showing the processes of building inequality in the, and reproducing gender inequality in the supposedly flat hierarchy of the network society and in the use and development of new technologies. So I would say that this is a fundamental stream of research. This is a fundamental issue to be tackled with. The work has not been finished by any means, but let's say that I feel we now are in condition not only to understand the processes, but even to design a number of measures and policies that can be then debated in society and implemented in organizations. So still much work has to be done, but we can say that after years of hard work, we know more or less the issues in this field. In a less visible research, there had been analysis of the cultural specificity of the use of technologies and the design of technologies by women. And frankly, here I think the record is uneven, and it's much more difficult to understand it. I know, by the way, that there is still controversial, the notion of the feminism of the different versus feminism of equality, but still, being plural in that sense, there's a considerable number of feminist theories and researchers who work on that perspective and from that perspective. Marina Subirats, among others. But in terms of the actual, so I think the debate between should women be as stupid as men, or are women, because they are different, they can produce a different culture that ultimately could be hegemonic in society, and then men could actually join this culture, and that would be the so-called new masculinities. So the debate is much more important than simply an ideological difference in the take. Of course, no one thinks that women are essentially different by essence, by nature, by biology. But there are differences, and then these differences, on the one hand, cannot be justified as the source of inequality, but on the other hand, cannot be denied as the source of a specific approach to society and to culture and to different forms of relating to life. However, in terms of the impact of this particular perspective in your field of research, I think the balance is very meager. There are some studies on the masculine bias toward violent video games, both in design and in practice. There are some studies on how usually young women, girls in the schools are much more studious than their male counterparts in the use of the internet. There are considerable evidence that boys play more and women work more in terms of what happens in the school. We also know that in terms of the uses of the internet, women tend to be more relational, and that would be part of a convergence between the characteristics of the technology and the supposedly specific culture of women. But overall, I don't see a conclusive body of evidence in that perspective. So certainly not at the same level than the set of studies that have analyzed in a comparative approach women inequality in the network society. So here I think some new research perspectives should be taken. I am intrigued by some very interesting remark by Sophia Livingstone in her book on women and children and the internet, which deals with children, but deals mainly with the specific relationship between women and their children over the internet, and how this creates a new bonding, a different kind of bonding that used to be. So I think broadening the perspective beyond the specific behavior that could be culturally differentiated, I think could be a new start in this kind of study. But personally, I think the most meaningful theme of research in this area, which is at this point not yet well developed, although there are a number of people working on it, is the role of the internet and networking technologies in empowering women. And for this, I refer to a number of recent studies on the internet, not on women, on the internet, which I think they are very interesting. Well, first, for quite a few years, we already know that one of the key characteristics of the internet as such, as a technology, is and we know that technology doesn't determine, so I don't even go into that discussion. But the technology is more, certain type of technologies are more prone to facilitate certain social processes than others. And we know that for years already that the internet has been a major platform to construct autonomy, the autonomy of the subject, individual or collective. By the way, one of the first empirical demonstrations of this with all the statistical mechanism, factor analysis, etc., was the study we did in Catalonia in 2003 on showing the decisive role of the internet practice in the building of autonomy for people in general. For the more autonomous an individual, the more uses the internet. The more uses the internet, the more autonomous is the individual in all dimensions of society. People have been saying that. I think it was the first time that we actually show it statistically on a representative sample of the Catalan population with 3,000 interviews. But recently, there has been, I would say, more sophisticated analysis on what is the role of internet, connecting something which I'm particularly more and more interested in, and you may take it up, not from me, but from the realm of research. The study of happiness. What study after study are showing lately is that in terms of what people want for themselves, it's not money, it's not power, it's not raw sex, it's happiness. However they define the happiness. Now, the interesting thing is that a number of studies are showing in the last 5 years a direct connection empirically between the use of internet and happiness. Interesting, huh? But why? I mean, this is a black box. The more you use the internet, it's exactly the contrary, by the way, that what the media say. You know, the more you use the internet, the more weird you become, the more isolated you become, the more alienated you become. Well, it's exactly the contrary, empirically speaking, on a wide range of comparative studies and across countries. And lately, there has been an attempt to try to identify which are the variables, the intermediate variables, because, I mean, in principle, a technology and happiness don't go together. You have to specify the relationship. But when you specify the relationship, something interesting appears. Not to refer to the whole body of literature, let me just mention the study, very recent study in the UK by David Wilmot, a sociologist, who did a large-scale study on using the database of the World Values Survey on 35 countries, and in 2010 was published in May 2010. And he analyzed 35,000 people from across the globe from two databases in 2005 and 2007. And controlling by other factors, the study showed, I cite, that the internet use empowers people by increasing their feelings of security, personal freedom, and influence. All feelings that have a positive effect on happiness and personal well-being. The effect, here is important, is particularly positive for people with lower income and less qualified, for people in the developing world, and for women. Age does not affect the positive relationship, it's in all ages. And why women? Because they are at the center of the network of their families. Internet helps them to organize their lives. Because they often feel isolation, then internet creates the conditions for chosen sociability. So here is the thing. The two intermediate variables between internet and happiness are 1, sociability, 2, empowerment. So to some extent, this is when I take the other surveys, not on internet but on happiness, these are exactly the two variables that people refer to as sources of their personal happiness. The density of their affective and personal relationships, not being alone, feeling together with other people, feeling supported, one thing. And second, and I can decide my life as much as I can, which is what we found in our study on autonomy. So empowerment, sociability are elements in self-perceived happiness in people's lives. But sociability and empowerment are also attributes connected to the use of the internet. And suddenly, what appears to be the black box, mysterious black box, you have internet, you are happy, becomes a meaningful relationship. I would not die defending the notion of happiness in abstract terms, but let's say personal satisfaction with your life. And so, but what for me this points out in terms of stream of research is that empowerment seems to me to be the critical issue for gender relationships studies these days. Empowerment of women, the mechanism through which there is a process of empowerment, not only in the interpersonal relationship, but in the entire realm of society, for me is a richer perspective than equality, and certainly more than cultural specificity. Because ultimately, gender relationships are power relationships, are part of the foundational relationships of society, which are power relationships. And therefore, focusing straightforwardly in processes of empowerment in all domains appear to be the critical issue for women's studies in general. And because of the role of internet in empowering people in general, that connection could be particularly fecund in terms of the analysis. But whatever we will learn on this matter will have to come from your work, from the work in the trenches of rigorous empirical research, and from the collegial meetings that, such as this one, in which you will bring together and elaborate further this type of research. So in that sense, it is a privilege for our institute to host your meeting, and you can be assured that as much as you want and as long as you want, we will continue to support your work, and we will be, to some extent, if you want, so your home, or I should say, your network home. Thanks for your attention.